Awesome. Well, thank you all for attending our first Culture First Chicago chapter event. My name's Terry Flanagan. I am chapter lead based out of here in Chicago. Work for a company called 5 to 9 as a senior business development rep. And, kind of to give the backstory of how I even got involved with Culture First is I met Jesse and Craig and a few other members of the Culture Amp team at Culture Summit in San Francisco back in October or September. Can't remember which one it was. And we just vibed. It was like we were fast friends, and from that we kept in touch. Jesse mentioned Culture First to me. She connected me with Alex, and I just loved what it stood for and what it's about. 5 to 9 is a similar platform to what Culture Amp offers. So it's aligned with who I am as a person, my core values as a human, as well as my company's core values. So that's just kind of a brief overview of me. How about you, Alex?
Yes. So, hi everyone. Alex Crassus. My pronouns are she, her. So I actually got involved in, I think it was or just before summer of 2021. Craig had put a post on LinkedIn, was looking for people who were interested in, leading this. I didn't even know what it was about. So this probably tells you about the type of person I am. I literally didn't even know what it was, but I knew I was in because I've always been a huge fan of Culture Amp. I've been an admin on the platform for years. So I was in whatever it was. So I spoke with him and then got onboarded in July of 2021. He connected me with Shauna Vollmer, who had been trying to kind of start up something in the Chicago area. And then we had our first event in October of 2021. Had a few events after that. But honestly, like both of us kind of really struggled with just getting things moving. And Shauna actually had, a lot come up at work. So she decided to step away, but it was actually perfect timing because Terry was interested. And that's when I got connected with him through Jesse. So I was really excited. I actually am VP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at an organization called Collaborative Solutions. I'm very passionate about culture. I've been working in the organizational culture space for quite a while. And as you might imagine, Terry's and my kind of thoughts, feelings align quite a bit. And we're both kind of in that DEI cultural space. So I was really excited, like I said, when he joined. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. If you could just go to the next slide, please. So, kind of our icebreaker here. I'm sorry, the agenda. So, just kind of went over our welcome. It'll be about a 10-minute connection. The work. So we'll kind of go over the research aspect of navigating uncertainty in organizations, and then the action where we'll have a survey, a questionnaire rather, and then we'll close. So looking to probably won't go to the full hour and a half, but this is kind of how we have it planned out right as we stand now. And our icebreaker, rosebud thorn. So Rose, something that you've accomplished that you feel good about. If we can go around, everybody can share. Bud, something that you're looking forward to in the upcoming week. And Thorn, a challenge that's caused frustration or something that you could use support with. I'll start. So something that I feel good and accomplished about for this week, especially, is I am on track with my fitness goals and my nutrition. I have been on top of that and really holding myself accountable and have a really good plan in place to hit the goals that I have for myself. My bud, something I'm looking forward to in this upcoming week. I have my final interview with Culture Amp on Friday. So yeah, I gone through 3 rounds of interviews so far, and just really excited about the opportunity to join the Culture Amp team. So fingers crossed there. I'm pretty confident. I think that I so far I've impressed the people that I've needed to impress. And then a challenge that's caused frustration. I don't know if any of you, I'm a father, and I have a son that's a senior in high school, and he's experiencing some senioritis right now. So trying to get him over the hump to get graduated and then focus on college and not focus on college now and let his grades fall by the wayside. So kind of dealing with that and trying to overcome those obstacles. I'm gonna popcorn over to Alex.
All right. Okay, so Rose is moving. So I moved yesterday. So the reason why it's like just there's nothingness behind me is because I angled the camera just right that you don't see all the boxes and craziness that is like under here, over there. I was telling Terry and Jesse that actually like as I was on the phone with Terry, my husband was trying to like put up like a picture, like a painting in the background. So I'd have something in my background, but it did not work out. But I'm still excited. I still see it as my rose that I actually got to move. Really excited about this new place. And then Bud. Okay, something I'm looking forward to. I think just like finishing unpacking, honestly. Like it would be really wonderful. I'm sure all of you have experienced moving, and it is you're like excited about kind of this next chapter, but it's like the process is a lot. So definitely looking forward to finishing that, finishing stuff around the selling process of the old condo. A challenge. Okay, so well, actually, I would say the biggest challenge I'm facing is getting through the selling process on my condo. I don't know if any of you could actually help me with that, but I would say that's probably my biggest challenge right now. But I know it's going to be fine. I just got to get through it. So if any of you have not sold a place yet, I don't recommend it. Like just honestly looking back, I'm like, I should just rent the rest of my life because I don't understand why anyone does this. But yeah, so that's my thorn. So I guess with everyone else, be sure, please introduce yourself. Anything you want to tell us about yourself. We've got a small group, so we're not worried about time. We gave you that agenda, but that was just like a loose guideline. So feel free to share anything you feel comfortable sharing. I am going to send it over to Izzy.
Great. I'm Izzy. I use she, her pronouns. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm in Durham, looking to move to Chicago. And so I guess something I feel good about that was kind of revelatory to me in the last couple weeks is like I have been thinking about pursuing my PMP probably for 10 years and I just like never knew. I was like, how am I going to find a like well, I'm currently unemployed. So how am I going to find an employer that will let me do project work so I can work towards this? And how do I have those conversations? And I realized that um something that I've been working on for the past 3 years. I've built my own business that like building a business in itself is not a project, but all of the things of like building your website, doing your marketing campaigns, all of those different pieces do count as projects. And so actually tonight, so I will have to hop off at the 5 o'clock mark for class for my PMP class. But after I take the class, I will actually be eligible to sit for the exam and I don't need 3 more years of experience. And I am so excited about that. Um, and so then a bud, something I'm looking forward to in the next week. I've been having a lot of like really lovely informational interviews with folks, and I've specifically targeted B Corps. And so every single one of them is delightful. And I just have a couple more next week. One of my friends is coming to town. I'm excited about that. So I've just been feeling very like it's both a rose and a bud of very supported and like held in my community. So that's good. A thorn is probably um, job search is a frustration. And I feel also very at peace with it right now. And so I think um, it's one of those things that like it can be incredibly frustrating and like I always need help with it. And simultaneously, I'm kind of just like going with it right now. But yeah, I will popcorn to Emily.
Well, hello everyone. I am Emily. I work for a financial services company outside of Detroit. Full disclosure, I did not know at all what to expect for this. I thought we were doing a webinar. So this is actually way more exciting than I thought. And I am so bummed though, because I do have to drop at the half-hour mark because it's 5:30 here. So it is dinner time for my friends. But I would say my butt for this is like meeting people. I am the only person, I'm the only me at my company. We're a fairly decent sized company, but I'm really the only one that does the employee engagement type stuff. So it's a very lonely place to be. And also it's very like doubtful, right? Like, am I right? I don't know. Like, no one can help confirm or deny that. So I'm constantly like looking for like who else does this work that could maybe help me out a little bit or like be a thought partner sometimes too. So it is so nice to meet all of you people. I'm so excited about this. And I would say that's my thorn, is something I've been really struggling with, is like, I'm the only one who does this. So leaders have to take my word for it or they don't. And, you know, that can be a lonely place. So thank you so much for welcoming me. And I think Jesse?
Awesome. Amazing. Well, Emily, great to meet you. I've had a chance to meet the lovely other humans on this call. So awesome to meet you. Let's see. And yeah, like this community was built for individuals like yourself that are like, I'm alone and I'm doing all this engagement stuff and I need other people and thought partners. So yeah, here we are. Let's see. Context similarly for you. So we have these global chapters. We now have 94 global chapters, and I'm the community engagement manager for all of our 94 global chapters with Culture First. So this is exciting to join you all here. Let's see, my rose, something I feel like in full bloom. I'm gonna like share something like a little more personal rather than professional, which is my rose is that it was my mom's birthday, and yesterday we went out with her and like one of her best friends and one of my best friends, and so we had like a little mom-daughter dinner last night, and that just like was chicken soup for the soul. So like pasta and wine, and we had a great time. So that was like, that's something that was like the highlight of my week. Something that's the bud for me is honestly the chapters community right now. It's just like so many like new faces and so many new individuals that are like a part of this like momentum that we have going. And so just feeling like really excited about like the blooming that's happening here. That's like I feel like we're at this, like it's about to be like a full bloom. So anyway, that's really cool. And then my thorn, this is also like personal, but like my mom's had some health challenges. And so I am like a part-time caretaker for her. So I'm balancing like taking care of my mom, plus like wanting to stay up to date on all things work, but also like take care of myself through the midst of like being a caretaker. So that's been a bit of a challenge or frustration, just like general in my life. So there you go. Over to you, Alex. Terry.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. I appreciate that. Thank you all for sharing. So to kind of dive right into it, I guess I'll hand it off to Alex and we'll kind of flow in from there.
All right. So I guess this is old news to most of you here, but Emily, welcome. And it's always good to reinforce what we're all about and talk through that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the Culture First community is. And Jesse, feel free to chime in if I get any of this wrong.
I believe in you. I believe in you.
All right. Okay. So we are a group of people around the world united in the shared belief that a better world of work is possible. We're harnessing the power of our community to create experiences which amplify, educate, and connect culture first activists. So community happens really everywhere, right? It happens. I find it really interesting that a lot of companies, since the start of the pandemic, have really upped hiring roles like community manager, really kind of understanding just this whole concept of belonging and how much people yearn for community. Any of us who have have ever taken a class in behavioral psychology, right? Like, that's a human need. That's like an instinctive, like baseline human need, but we never kind of think about what that looks like in the workplace. So that's what we're all about here, just to like help people understand community can happen everywhere. It is about just, really coming together around, shared experiences, or, talking through things that everyone is passionate about. So really excited to be a part of this. So our goal, so we want to create the largest community who believe in a better world of work is possible, who believe a better world of work is possible and are willing to take action to make this belief a reality. Okay. Our mission is to create inspiring experiences to amplify, educate, and connect culture first activists. So we all come together towards this mission, what we'll be doing to help bring the change we want to see. Our 5 core principles. So I'll explain more about them. I have the definitions on the next slide here, so you can see. Foster belonging and acceptance. I would even say foster belonging and embracing each other. I never like the word acceptance because it feels too close to tolerate. And I want it to really be a community, and all of us really want it to be a community where we feel embraced. Be willing to reflect and grow. So all about a growth mindset here. We can all learn from each other. We all have different experiences. And let's use that to learn and grow. Have the courage to be vulnerable. I have to say, I think that's really a strength of this community. Any space that I've been in culture first, people are very open, which is refreshing. It doesn't feel like you have to kind of coax people to be vulnerable. But because it's that space of shared understanding, it's a safe space where you do feel comfortable being vulnerable. Put learning into action. So that's where we go into that growth mindset, right? That's how we're going to work, or that's how we're going to achieve our goal. And then connection inside, business outside. So we realize and expect that connections and business opportunities will come from this community, but the goal is to foster human connection, learning, and action, not transactional business opportunities. So we'll never have a speaker on who's just like trying to like sell you something, right? I think we've all been there, and it's kind of annoying. It's great if you can get some learning out of it, but like you really want to feel like it's authentic learning. So we're all about the connections, and if business opportunities happen on the side, like when Terry gets that job with Culture Amp, right? Like that's a great thing that happens on the side, but that's not the sole reason Terry's here, and that's not the sole reason Culture Amp. It's highlighting different people, right? So those are the 5 core principles. So before we go into the discussion, oh gosh, and I know Emily, you have to actually go in a few minutes. Okay, Terry, what do you think? Should we just dive right into the discussion?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's do that. So I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. So once again, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be discussing navigating organizational uncertainty and how to manage those challenges it presents. Some of the key points that we're going to be highlighting today are how employee experience is greatly impacted by culture of the organization, the impact that retention and hiring rates have on the employee experience, and how it can affect employee well-being, motivation, and commitment. Also, how learning and development plays a role in driving engagement for employees. And then lastly, best practices implemented depending on the direction of the company based on hiring and retention rates. Our hopes is that this discussion will provide a valuable insight and actionable takeaways for all of us. So let's get started. So what variables do you see creating ambiguity in today's world, or creating ambiguity, particularly in your organization? The example that I have, and I'll start with my example, and then everyone can share what their thoughts are. So my example would be rapid technology change. So with all of the new technology. I'm not sure if everybody's heard of Chat GPT or some of these APIs that it's exciting, but it's really scary at the same time because a lot of these technologies could ultimately replace humans for jobs and things like that. So that's a bit scary. So rapid technology change is one of the examples that I would use. And I guess I will popcorn it over to Emily since she's hopping off soon, and maybe you can give me some examples of what you think.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for our organization right now is the market. We're a financial services company specializing in mortgages. So, Alex, if you need a real estate agent, I could probably help you out. But like interest rates and home buying and like compensation and like that is really throwing us for a loop. Because if we can't, if customers aren't buying, then we're not selling, and then and then that really straps us for what we can do for our team members and support our team members through that. And we're not in a place to say like, yeah, it's going to be fine in 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. We don't know. Everybody's along for the ride with us, and we're doing the right things along the way.
Awesome. Izzy, I know that you're currently looking for work, but maybe in previous roles or just generally what you see, what can you add to this?
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting, and actually kind of to dive in both to what you said, Terry, and also what Emily said is I've actually been using and paying for a tool that is because ChatGPT is just open source at this point, but like I've been using it for several years. And Terry, I don't think it's going to take over jobs. It's mainly that like the just because we will see technology be an asset to creativity, but it's not like even if it does, then let's hope that there's more creative jobs for us to do. Like then we can use our creativity better. But something that I've been thinking a lot about is a book I'm reading, and it's about semiconductors and basically Moore's law that like every 1 to 2 years, the density of information kind of that can be passed through semiconductors doubles, and so that makes memory smaller that and allows us to do more and allow that rapid change. And it talked at one point in the book of how they decided to offshore all these semiconductor facilities because it was just so much cheaper in other countries. And I thought I had, and this is like an ambiguity that I'm just kind of like, and a cultural thing I'm wrestling with is like, if it's so much cheaper in other countries, why do companies hire Americans? And I think the answer that comes to mind that I think of is because Americans are the number one consumer. And so if you are making things to sell to consumers, you have to also employ us. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I think that like the identity that like we're told that we are consumers versus say workers, or that we should have solidarity with each other, which is a lot of the stuff I think about in like community work, is how strong is the identity of a consumer, and like is that good or bad, is kind of what's been on my mind of how stable are all of these systems that we live in.
No, that's awesome insight. I never really thought about it like that in terms of why Americans are the most sought after, but it does kind of make sense. Jesse, do you have anything to add?
I know I can't really think of any other variables off the top of my head. I mean, the technology change one's amazing, and like obviously the markets and economy is like such a given. I would say like even Culture Amp's responding right now to like market uncertainty and things like that in terms of like cutting back on travel and where are things that we don't necessarily like. How can we be more resourceful with like our money and also prioritizing more effectively, so that's been something that's I'm seeing internally.
Awesome. Yeah, so a couple of examples that were listed were the pending recession or the possibility of a recession, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical instability and conflicts, ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, worldwide rise in inflation, and then the global tech stock crash. were some other examples as well. Um, I get, and so that kind of leads us into the research aspect, which I'll hand back over to Alex.
All right, let's dive in. So why don't I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so I can just kind of talk to you through the research, and hopefully you had a chance to check it out. I'll actually put a link in the chat so that way if you want to have that handy, I just put that in there. Okay.
Did you email it out before, Alex?
What'd you say?
Did you email it out before?
It was in the event description. But like, no worries at all. If you did not have a chance, like, that's fine. We're going to go over everything, and it will be recorded. So you can just basically listen to Terry, Jesse, and I just like wax poetic about this article, right? What do you have to drop off? Okay. So, intro to the article. So let's talk about the research, right? So our culture determines how quickly you're able to pivot and continue to prosper in difficult times. How much time employees spend on productive work rather than spinning their wheels, how committed and willing employees are to go above and beyond, both during the good times and the not so good times, and whether employees feel that working at your company hurts or helps their well-being, which ultimately decides whether they choose to stay. So what this article is doing is kind of breaking down different types of cultures and how you might address what's going on based upon where your organization lands. The foundations of this research. So Culture Amp was able to measure the employee experience to understand what it feels like in a particular culture. Culture Amp looked at almost 2,500 companies worldwide and just under 2 million employees. So this was a very robust research project. One of the things I love about Culture Amp, Jesse knows I love the research, love it. So the findings. So one significant factor that impacts an employee's experience is how quickly the people around them leave the company. Unsurprisingly, employees at low retention companies who see their peers leaving are more overstressed than employees at high retention companies. So over 6 percentage points that they're overstressed. The other major factor that influences your employee experience is how quickly people are joining the company. New members disrupt the status quo. So yeah, I think we've all experienced, if you're at a company where a lot of people are leaving, that is one source of stress, right? And then if you're at a company where a lot of people are joining, you're constantly having to onboard new people, you're constantly having to meet new people, deal with new people. That's also a sense of stress too. Interestingly, employees at high hiring companies have a positive outlook despite the struggle to maintain a healthy work-life balance. These employees feel more motivated and are more likely to believe the company will succeed. So why are these employees motivated to put in that extra time? These employees believe working hard will be good for their career. According to the data, development is the second most influential driver of engagement at high hiring companies. In contrast, the top driver of engagement is psychological safety for employees at low hiring companies. I would say psychological safety is like an amazing retention tool regardless, and also just the right thing to do for a workplace. That was to the side. While retention and hiring have distinct impacts on the employee experience, 4 unique company directions are revealed when we look at the intersection of these two factors. So this is where we get into kind of where an organization might be placed. So the first category is rotating. That's a company that has a high hiring rate and low retention. Second category, expanding, high hiring rate and high retention. So that's the unicorn. Holding, low hiring rate and high retention. And then decreasing, low hiring rate and low retention. So despite the differences, some findings are true for all company types. The top reason employees say they join a company, development, is also the top reason they ultimately leave a company. While many companies sell employees the dream of career development, few actually deliver on that promise. Every company's culture is unique, but there are general best practices you can implement depending on the company's direction, such as the intersection of hiring and retention rate. So what I love most about this article and this research is it's not just, hey, here's all the theoretical stuff, now figure out what to do with it. This is very big on the actions. We just want to make sure you had the grounding, the foundation, and we're going to get into kind of how you might address things based upon finding out where your organization is. Okay, I'll hand it over to Terry.
Awesome. Thank you. So originally, I guess we were going to complete like the little questionnaire to kind of see what kind of company that your company was. I know, Izzy, maybe you can use the example of your previous employer or something like that to kind of gather where we are. So I've just put the link in
You
the
beat
chat.
me to it. I was just putting it in the chat.
I just put the link in the chat. So if we all just want to take a minute and complete it, and then we'll kind of reconvene here. Let's say we'll give it 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Let's go 3 minutes. I'll play some tunes and we'll reconvene with our results. I forgot to cue the music. I'm playing the music off my phone, by the way.
This would have been so interesting with Emily because she like actually runs engagement and like if she would have had the metrics too.
Yeah, for sure.
Specifically. But yeah.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no,
Oh,
I was just gonna say I actually have I have our engagement survey metrics. I have access to the back end because I
Can you
look at it
share?
from the AI perspective.
Can you share like your like what type of company? You don't need to say the metrics or whatever, but can you share what kind of organization that you work with, Alex? Like, is it a rotating, holding? What were the other ones?
Decreasing
Rotating,
and expanding.
expanding, holding, yeah, and decreasing. Do you know which
I love
one?
it. Terry, Jesse's taking over facilitation here.
No.
Okay, Jesse, I see you. Yeah, I could start, right? And then that'll start the conversation. And all right, so I'll start. So the thing is, though, I answered this thinking of kind of traditional hiring. And so I wasn't thinking about, so we haven't been hiring because we just acquired 400 people from another company. You know what I mean? So that's why we haven't been hiring. But actually, if you looked at our hiring rate, if you include all those people of the acquisition as being hired, actually we'd have very high hiring rate. I didn't think about that. So I should have been decreasing. But now that I think about it, I think it is actually the one that is
expanding, maybe?
No, it's rotating. So it would be more rotating.
Got it.
Yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of different reasons for the turnover. It has slowed down this year, but we were bought by our parent company in June of 2020. And, a lot of people had always joined us because we had that more boutique feel. smaller company. We're expanding to a size where I think it's like people are deciding, do I want to work for a 2,000 person company? When I joined, it was only like 200, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, do I still want to do that? So a lot of it is, turnover of people deciding, you know what, like, I kind of want to work for a smaller company, or I want something different. We had a lot of people who had been here quite a while. And then also just, the fact is, anytime you get acquired, right? Like we've been able to remain mostly independent, but it always gets to a point where the parent company, has more and more say. And so like we recently went over to their benefits, which did save us money in some respects, but we did lose some things too. So, and that was another thing that made people say like, like maybe this isn't the right place for me. But that's what we've been experiencing. So it'll be interesting to see how, once we've like fully incorporated all the folks as part of the acquisition that happened, that was January 1. We're still going through all of the integration procedures. It'll be interesting to see kind of where we level out at. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my company. Like I said, for the quiz, it ended up being decreasing, but I realized it's probably more rotating right now.
Awesome. Yeah, so to kind of share my results, my company, I was a bit surprised it's holding, and I mean it makes sense. I work for a small, probably about a 15-person startup, and my guess would have been that it was going to be decreasing, but I think that when you work for a smaller company and people leave, it seems like 15 or 20 people left, especially if that somebody's on a contract basis or something like that. They leave and they're not replaced. It just, their presence is missed immensely. So, but I guess, with a company that small, if we, lose one or two people, holding would make sense. But yeah, that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of what's going on over here. What about you, Jesse? Oh, go ahead, Izzy. You can go.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about is, so prior to starting my own businesses, I am a licensed massage therapist and I do rehabilitation. And so I was thinking about Massage Envy, and I had two very different experiences. For my first year as a massage therapist, I went into a clinic that was like fully staffed. It's one of the largest in the state. I think we had 18 rooms. And I was fully booked from day one at over 30 hours, when 25 is usually full time for therapists. And then conversely, and the one I answered for was the second experience, in which high turnover, and also high hiring, because they were trying to get more therapists in, just because they're in such high demand. But what I noticed when I was working there is that I was rarely booked, because after 3 years of the pandemic, people have not stopped going to massage, but stopped being reliably showing up to their appointments. And I think it's just because they assume they probably have been burned several times of like, oh, well, my therapist might not be there, kind of thing. And so it said on there expanding, which surprised me, because in my head it kind of felt like a bad situation, so it felt like decreasing. But I could see that, like, because they're trying to hire so much, that it does fall into that category.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Jesse?
I don't know. Well, so I don't have I don't have our retention numbers, since I don't work in like the people ops side of things or people experience, at Culture Amp. But I am assuming, this is all assumption, this is not based on data, but I'm assuming that we went from as an organization from a high hiring rate, because we were hiring tons of people, with high retention, to what I would imagine now over the last like month or so. I'm assuming we've moved from a low hiring rate with high retention. So if I had to guess, Culture Amp would probably be like, went from expanding to holding. That would be my guess.
I was gonna go over to LinkedIn Sales Nav and pull up what it was looking like, but I'll reframe. Awesome. Well, I guess I'll hand it back off to Alex for back to the research.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so there are some things each of the 4 types of companies can take action on to set a solid foundation that enables them to endure and overcome uncertainty. So that's kind of what we talked about earlier. Like, there's so many variables that even if you're doing well, you're knocking it out of the park as a company, like you still can succumb to external pressures, so many different things going on in the market. I mean, even I've been hearing more and more about companies making decisions around locations based around climate change. Like, a lot of companies are looking to move away from the coast literally because of climate change. So it's like, it's so many things. So even if you're doing really well, like there could be other things going on that are really important to think about. So the rotating companies, so this would be high hiring rate and low retention. Focus on promoting employees from within and creating opportunities that motivate them to grow in place. So, I spoke earlier where, I talked about how even though the quiz said one thing, I think we're probably more that rotating. This definitely resonates with me. I feel like this is something that we've been telling our hiring managers. And it's funny because they immediately go to, oh, well, we don't have a budget for it. It's like, no, wait. We have access to the full LinkedIn Learning Library. Like, I could whip up a collection for you in no time. You know what I mean? Like, you could point out, hey, Izzy, you spoke to the PMP. You could take a whole bunch of courses that will give you continuing ed credit for the PMP, right? Because we have a project management team. Like, there's so many courses within LinkedIn Learning. You get certificates. Like, when you finish a course and go right on your LinkedIn Learning profile, there's so many ways to take advantage of what you already have. And I also say to them, like, we have an L&D team. We have me. We have all these other people that can help you out. Like, but you would just have to ask for it. Like, and we're happy to support your team and figure out how can we get creative about giving people development and growth. And so often too, it's even just like, can they shadow, like, maybe another role that they're interested in? Could they shadow that person, for a few different meetings? Or, could they do some sort of rotating thing, right? Like, just depending on the type of role. So many companies, especially in times like this, with everyone's worried about the recession, and a lot of companies, they're kind of pulling back on spending, reminding the managers that it's not about spending as much as it is on your employee feeling like their development is valued, and how can you provide that no matter what the budget is. So that's a little bit about rotating. Anything else anyone wanted to add around what might be helpful for a company that has high hiring rate and low retention?
I was going to add it was interesting that they talked about, obviously career development is important. And then also having effective systems and processes. So making sure that there's a effective onboarding process for when you're bringing on so many new people. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel, and there's it makes sense. There's thinking about the employee journey, the experience of onboarding is important, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've read a number of case studies about how high retention companies do onboarding and why they're different. And a big part of that is not only do you feel like you can grow there, but also feel like you understand the culture that you're in. So the example they had, I believe was, I think it's actually Lululemon, puts all of their new hires through a very specific training course that is for leadership and for development, so that people know from the start, this is our language, this is and this is the jargon, and also this is how we view development.
The other part about this too, Alex, was bringing on more diversity to the organization, as if you're not already focused on that, making sure that new employees are feeling included and that they belong also it seems like a big piece that I was reading too.
Yeah, I guess I would be curious because we mentioned it earlier about psychological safety being important. I mean, such a big challenge for companies to bring on new people is that they weren't safe in the first place. Um, and so I'm curious, maybe not what those companies are saying, but those companies who are making those steps, like what do those steps look like if you've kind of not been a safe place for folks in general? And so how to actually create that safety if you really truly want to change your culture.
Yeah, that's something I work with our leaders on quite a bit, as you might imagine, in my role. Um, Especially because belonging, it is very hard to describe. How do you, like, you can't tell someone they belong. Do you know what I mean? You can't tell someone. There's many things you can do, right? And I coach them on inclusive meetings and, just kind of different ways to approach. I'll give you an example. We have one leader who, I sat in on all the 9-box conversations, really just from the vantage point of less about kind of looking out for bias. So of course, if I see it show up, I call it out, but really more thinking like, what is down the pipeline? Like, do we really have diversity in our leadership pipeline? Because if we have it, then I'm like, okay, that's one strategy. But if they're not being seen as future leaders, that's a whole nother strategy that I need to dive into, right? So I was sitting in on all those conversations, and I spoke to him afterwards, and I was like, okay, like if I just looked at like just 9-box, right? I do not see any world in which we have anyone of color anywhere close to leadership in any time soon, and we are going to continue to hemorrhage people when we don't have that diversity at the top. We've got a lot of diversity at the junior levels, like a lot of companies, right? But like really struggle at those higher levels. And it's simple things like, because he was like, I don't even know who, blah, blah, blah. And like, I just started saying like, when's the last time you had skip levels with people throughout your organization? I get that it's a big organization, but all you have to do just like once a quarter, you know what I mean? Like just have like a rotating meeting with various people, like not even just people of color, but like literally everyone. Like you should know everyone. So that way, when it comes to promotions, so often what's going on is people are just not even thought of, right? Because people kind of prioritize the people that they gravitate to, which because of our biases, often are people who are like us in, a number of ways. So it's like simple things like that, like, oh, I didn't even think about like just literally getting to know your people a little bit more. And of course, like, you have to approach the conversation appropriately. Like I was like, don't just like throw time on people's calendar and freak them out. Like, really like let them know, like, I want to learn about you. Even just that. Like I remember earlier when I was in the org, I had, there was a leader who he would just randomly send me a ping, C-level leader, randomly send me a ping just to say, hey, how are you doing? Just like little things like that meant the world to me. Like, oh my God, like he thinks of me, like, like, and those are the types of things that create those kind of moments of belonging. I know I'm someone, and probably a lot of people in this community can relate to this. I'm someone who's never felt like I belonged in kind of any room. And so it's always the moments of belonging. Like if you ask me overall, do I feel a sense of belonging? It'd be rare that I said yes in really any situation, but I could actually count several moments of belonging where I felt like, oh, okay, like this makes me feel welcome here. So I think it's just those series of moments, and the more that I can kind of point out to the different leaders, like, this is where you missed the mark, or hey, like this is what you could do in this scenario, that builds that. It's interesting you bring that up though, because that is one thing that I wanted to ask. Jesse, I don't know if you have any insights from what you've heard from the Culture Amp research, but I know you all use the question as well around, I feel a sense of belonging at work. And what's really interesting for us, so that's an inclusion driver, right? What's interesting for us is we really didn't see any difference in scores between racial demographics or gender demographics. But what we did see was an overall lower score because people wanted to see each other in person again. Like everything was about like, we need more moments of connection. I guess it's just down to you and me, Jesse. I don't know where Terry went, but
he just messaged and said he lost connection, had to restart his computer.
That's okay. Well, I mean, you and I can talk. You know, we can talk.
I honestly, I still feel like I'm still like wrapping my head around this research. Honestly, like,
yeah.
this stuff's so interesting.
So they mentioned implement exit surveys or interviews or state interviews. So we do engagement conversations, create internal opportunities for growth by asking employees for their development aspirations and taking their preferences into account when designing upcoming job openings. We require a personalized and scalable approach to development, focus on future-proofing your systems and processes for scale along with culture. And if you aren't doing so already, focus on bringing in more diversity like you spoke to, and assess if the employees feel included and like they belonged. So right on track there. So then we get into the expanding category, which again is the high hiring rate and high retention. So those are the people that are just like firing on all cylinders, super crazy busy, bringing people in, everybody's staying. It's a big party. In high hiring companies, the data shows women are taking on significantly more workload than men. I don't even need research to tell me that. I could have told you that without any research behind it.
Yeah.
They have the worst gender gap when it comes to dividing workloads fairly. So focus on implementing a structured performance review process to close the gender gap. And especially when you think about the return to office, there's so many, there's so much research that has come out around women often being assigned the office work, no matter what title they have, right? They're just like assigned the office work, even have nothing to do with anything. And yet, and oftentimes what happens too, if no one assigns it to them, it's like they feel compelled to do it.
Right.
Men don't even have that. Obviously, I'm generalizations. Like, don't even have that. Like, oh yeah, I should like help pick up or those things. And then on top of that, you have things like women always being the note taker in the room. It's just like assumed that the woman is going to be the note taker. And then on top of that, people have the audacity to call women not strategic. Well, it's not that we're not strategic. It's that we are often in the trenches with the team because we don't want the team to fail. So we, that one, we don't get an opportunity to show that we're strategic.
That one really like hits and resonates for me, like on a personal level. Hey, Terry.
I'm back. That has literally never happened before. I was like, everybody in the house disconnect from Wi-Fi right now. Wow.
All good. We talked about the rotating, and now we're talking about expanding.
Awesome.
Types of companies. But Alex, go off, queen. Like
you missed it, Terry. You missed it. So I was saying that expanding companies, the data shows that women are taking on significantly more workload than men. And I was talking about a couple different things. So when you talk about like return to office, right? What often happens in the office is women are just assigned, either outright assigned or by default assigned the, kind of like the housework of the office. You know what I mean? Like cleaning up the kitchen area. Like they're just expected that it's going to be a woman that's going to clean that up. And that takes away from how they're being seen. It actually lessens respect for them, right? And then you also have, women, the stereotype is that women aren't as strategic. And oftentimes we're not allowed or even given the opportunity to be strategic because we're often in the trenches with the team. Because we're so kind of set on making sure that the team, like when we show up for the team thrives, and just kind of, nurturing all of that, whether it's part of our natural personality or not, we know it's an expectation of us. So just those were kind of the things that came to mind. And when things are like fast and furious, and, process, like a lot of processes aren't even in place yet, that's where like things especially can go awry. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that there would be a bigger gap between women and men in those environments. I don't know if either of you want to add anything else. It doesn't have to be just about that, but just about what comes to mind when you think about expanding companies that have both that high hiring rate and high retention.
I when I first got into tech sales, I was with the logistics company, and it was fast growing and everybody loved it. But the learning and development was top notch. It was one of the industry leaders in logistics, Coyote Logistics. I'm not sure if you all are familiar, but to walk into the atmosphere was just electric, and you wanted to be there. And we worked from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. It was a grind, but you left fulfilled. You learned so much, and because of all of the learning and development that took place there, I was able to transition over to any other company, even when it was different type of sale, and fit in seamlessly, because people were seeking us out because they were like, "Hey, if you can survive at Coyote Logistics, and I know the type of learning and development that they provide there, then coming over here will be a piece of cake." So that kind of echoes about the learning and development aspect of things, and how that while that is the most important, that's generally why people leave, simply because they've gained all that knowledge and you've hit a ceiling on where you can grow there, and then after probably 5 to 7 years, it's time to transition someplace else.
Mm.
Yeah, so even a bit more of that, kind of going into that rotating category.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, and things get so big, you're moving so fast, and like then teams start to kind of silo and specialize, and then cross collaboration becomes a challenge, because then you're like, wait, you're working on that? Like, I didn't know you were working on that. And like, we're already kind of doing this, it's like that like when you think of like blitz scaling, but also what came up for me is like high hiring, high retention, also in terms of like making sure that the teams are prioritizing effectively, because then there's just like people are running around like a million miles an hour, and you're like, okay, but are we doing like the right things from a strategic level? Like, let's zoom out and like prioritize effectively. And I think that goes across the board, regardless of what kind of category you are in. But that one specifically comes up for me because you're just like, everyone's moving so quickly. There's
Yeah.
so many different people, and you're onboarding so many different people, and getting them spun up on how we do things around here, and maintaining the culture can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So some of the things the article kind of brings to light, as far as recommendations for the expanding category, to evaluate hiring plan to ensure it's keeping workloads reasonable for employees. Ensure role expectations are clear. So spot on with what you were talking about, Jesse. This can be difficult as roles quickly change and during hypergrowth, but can be achieved through regular one-to-one conversations between managers and employees. I don't know about you all, but we have managers who, pretty much all of our managers do have regular one-to-ones, but it's clear that like some have better one-to-ones than others. So like really like instilling like, what are the habits you should have? Like how should you be approaching your one-to-ones for effectiveness? Implement a structured performance review process so that all employees, tenured or not, have an equal playing field. So again, that theme of evaluating your systems to support the employee engagement and retention. So now we can dive into holding, which is low hiring rate and high retention. These employees are uniquely motivated by feeling respected, and they want to be valued for the unique contributions they make to the company. So we want to focus on implementing performance calibrations to increase the employees' perceptions of accurate recognition. Focus on creating psychological safety so employees feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work. Implement performance review calibration so that employees are evaluated on the same criteria across managers and departments. Ask employees how they want to be recognized and appreciated, which you should do in every kind of company. I feel like that's often gets lost. A lot of people think like everyone wants a party thrown for them. And I'll never forget, I had this woman who reported into me, and I was so excited to recognize her in front of everyone. And I did that. And she was so angry at me because she's just someone who like doesn't like this, like hates the spotlight. Like she was like angry at me. And so that was my learning lesson, that like I didn't ask her how she wanted to be recognized and how she, and to her, it actually showed that I didn't value her. because I wasn't taking into consideration what she actually wanted. So, like I said, this is for the holding company, but I think this is important for everybody, and celebrate long tenured employees on their work anniversaries, which, again, all of this advice I feel like is good for any company. But any reactions to the recommendations around the holding companies?
I'm still looking at the research right now.
I guess I can't really relate to that. I've never been in that type of environment before. So it's really hard for me to kind of.
That checks out for you, actually. Always been a part of like high growth organization.
It's either high growth or going to startups, and
Yeah.
that's my wheelhouse.
It takes a certain type. I'm the same way. We're a different breed of employee, that's for sure.
I always tend to get in at the ground floor though, so I'm part of the influx of hiring.
No, I think that's so valuable about, like, I think so many organizations right now, like, because we were talking about responding to ambiguity in the market, specifically around, like, so many organizations are slowing down their hiring right now, so they're gonna roll from those top two categories of like rotating and expanding down to the decreasing and holding, which is going to be interesting to see it. Like, makes it so easy to think about like how employers are going to need to respond, but it's a great way to visualize it,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah. I mean, to be honest though, I don't know how many companies survived 2021 and 2022 with having like excellent retention. Like I feel like all companies were feeling a bit of a retention piece the last 2 years. Now it's very different. Now people are kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to make a move because of how the market is. You still have some, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was trying to think of because I'm always in the world too of like, I'm always trying to get in earlier. Like I was at a startup before this. So I don't really ever stay anywhere that if somewhere was in a holding pattern, I probably wouldn't stay there. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, like difficult for me to relate to as well. But I mean, all the insights shared were excellent. I just think they were actually great for like really any company.
Yeah.
And even thinking about those stay interviews, right? Like, because, they talked about like it's high retention, that's not static. Like your retention can sink at any given time. So even though stay interviews were talked about with the rotating companies, I still think, like, especially when you're in that pattern of no growth, that's the perfect time to say like, actually, like, why do you all stay? Like, why are you all still here?
Yeah. Well, they talked about how the holding companies, high retention, low hiring, make it possible for employees to maintain a healthy blend between work and personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it sounds like all three of us kind of gravitate towards those like high growth companies that are generally hiring really quickly. And like, it's like the overachiever almost. I'm just gonna say that. Like it all seems like we probably fit into that category, or we aspire to be. That like
we love chaos.
Yeah, whatever that says about our traumatic childhoods. But then when you're in a holding environment, like it does make sense that you're like, oh well, like we're not in this like crazy high growth phase, that like I can kind of find like a healthy level of like balance. And like it would be interesting to see like the well-being score and how that relates to these 4 different categories as well, actually.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jesse. It just got me thinking, like, just how I am personality wise, and what I envision like people that work at holding companies are like. They're content. They're comfortable with monotony and things like that. And I need that growth and that excitement to because generally speaking, I think that when there's low hiring and high retention, I don't feel like there's a lot of change going on in those organizations internally. So if there's not a lot of change, then there's a lot of static going on in terms of innovation. So the process is the process, and it's been the process for years.
Yeah, I have a perfect story for this because it's actually, I had totally forgotten about this in my experience. So I worked for a school, an arts college for 2.5 years in New York. And it was very much very high retention. And I mean, I wouldn't say it was like necessarily a low hiring rate. It wasn't low for higher ed, but probably if you compared it to like what we're used to, right? And my first week on the job, I was told to slow my pace. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I was, they're like, you go so quickly that we're worried that the CFO is going to see you not have enough to do and think that you don't need a full-time role. Like, and that's what taught me, and this is what women do especially, like that's what taught me, oh, actually I'm rewarded if I do go slower versus I'm actually, if I go faster and do better and turn things in and overachieve, all that happens is they give me more work to do. So actually, it's best if I, like just hang out a little bit, maybe take my time a little bit with these different things.
Oh, that's an amazing.
I'm constantly having to relearn that.
Oh, that's so fascinating and such a good story because it's so true.
Well, and the woman who sat two desks behind me had been at the school longer than I'd been alive.
Wow.
So yeah, like she started there before I was born.
Wow.
So I mean, and that just gave me, so that's why I knew I was going to get everything I could out of my experience there, but like I wasn't going to be there a long time.
Right.
But the great thing is, they knew the only way to keep me was to give me all the development I asked for. So they paid for me to get certified. They paid for all these different courses. So I was able to make the most of it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have stayed the 2.5 years that I did stay. And when I left, my boss was like, I can't even be mad at you because like you deserve a higher role. We can't create positions here. So yeah, I thought that was, I don't know why it didn't occur to me earlier, but yeah, I think that's kind of a perfect example of that type of company.
Such a perfect example. And what's coming up for me is like doing more does not equal more, It's like, but like we get so caught in that rabbit hole of like, well, I did da 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 da. Now where's my return for it,
Right. Things they don't teach you in school.
Yeah, seriously.
So then we have the last category, decreasing. So low hiring rate and low retention. So these employees want to play a part in the company's hopeful comeback story. They care a lot about factors like decision making at the leadership level. So you're going to do is implement exit surveys and interviews or state interviews to better understand why employees are leaving or planning to stay. Continue to seek employee feedback and act on it. Create a compelling vision for the future, ensuring that employees have a framework for aligning their individual goals to team and company ones, and create accountability for achieving those goals. So, there's probably a lot of companies in that decreasing category. Like as we move, I mean, you've heard, I don't know about your LinkedIn feeds, but mine's constantly filled with people being laid off. So yeah, I'm very curious what they're doing when you see 1,000+ of your colleagues were laid off yesterday through Zoom. How do you what do you do about morale? So I don't know if anything kind of came to mind for either of you.
Yeah, so for me personally, right when the pandemic hit, I was one of the casualties to one of those fast growing companies that had to repivot and laid off 65% of the sales team, and I was one of them. And a lot of my former coworkers are still there. Everybody who was there longer than 3 years when the company first started stayed on. And kind of the conversation that we talk about today is the challenge of rebuilding that culture, especially going from 100% in office to that hybrid model, and trying to recreate that culture and things like that. And it's been difficult for them, but it was actually a lucrative move for them long term, being in the fulfillment space, kind of a rival to Amazon. But like you said, with what went on with Twitter and I believe Lyft and all those other organizations that had those mass layoffs. I can't imagine how they had to, because the pandemic, that was justification for a large layoff, right? But kind of Twitter, like, I don't think anyone saw it coming. I went to Afrotech down in Austin, and Twitter had a booth that was supposed to be there, and it was just empty because nobody came, because they had fired all of those people. And what they did was, some of the people that were supposed to be there, they gave them a ticket to go there to kind of network, to try to find jobs. And everyone was just kind of shell shocked. So I could only imagine what the employees that were left behind must feel.
Whoa, that is a freaking story. Yeah, this one's like, well, two things came up for me, which are like, like the recommendation of what you can do with, like, you always think about the exit survey, but I don't think a lot of employers think about like surveys. I think we think about engagement surveys, but I don't think we think specifically around like, why are people sticking around? So that's like, I feel like that's super interesting, and not just like thinking about it from a surveying perspective, but like, are you having an outside third party even like having a conversation with those human beings rather than just sending out a survey? Is going to bring a very different conversation rather than just talking to someone in HR. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was we're just talking about exit surveys. We were talking about low retention, low hiring. People are leaving. Oh, I had another thought, and it seemed to have gone. I don't know. It'll come back.
What do you think, Terry?
No, I mean, it's with I'm just looking at some of the bullet points here.
I remember what I thought, which is, I mean, I know we're geeking out about Culture Amp research right now, but Culture Amp has another like research study that was coming on around like the impacts of like layoffs, and how like the time with which a layoff impacts the team is a lot longer than people think.
Right.
Like, it's like almost 18 months, like 12 to 18 months of like impacting psychological safety and trust for the team, basically,
Right.
which is like bananas. Because I think sometimes we're like, oh, well, let's just like figure that out in like 6 months, and it's like it takes like over a year to like recover from that from an employee standpoint, which I think is like super fascinating to this discussion of what's happening with layoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I was looking over the bullet points, and the create accountability for achieving those goals, creating compelling vision for the future. Yeah, again, there will be some. I've never been the one that was left behind after a mass layoff, so I would I just envision like tumbleweeds blowing in the desert or something, like, oh, such and such used to sit there. And I had such a relationship, and it's just like the whole routine changes. I just imagine morale would just be really low.
Well, and what's interesting is, having been in HR, like I've actually been an HR person conducting a RIF, reduction in force, right? And I'll never forget. So for my part, I go into this office. So there were 3 offices where we had layoffs. It was a total of 30 people, which was like 10% of our company at the time. So this was a previous company that I worked at. And so my first ever RIF, it's like a few months in, I'll never forget. And I go into the conference room. So the way they decided to do it at this office was they put everyone that was going to be laid off in a conference room at once. I'm not saying this is necessarily a way to go. They put everyone else in like a different conference room. So like, it's kind of like you have the Zoom link for these people and the Zoom link for these people. But honestly, I don't know if there would have been any good way for this particular like office culture. I really don't know if there would have been any good way to do it, because the way they did it at another office is they did one by one. So everyone's just sitting in their desk waiting to be the next person called. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so like, I don't know if like when everyone's in the same office, You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that there's necessarily a great way to do it. But I go into the conference room and I'll never forget the managing director, who is like not an emotional person, just starts bawling. Like, can't even get the words out, just starts bawling. Okay. And then we have the person who's right underneath her who is stone faced. Like they have never heard the word emotion in their life. And so I have to be like somewhere in the middle. Like, and I'm just like, again, this is my first ever rip. And it's like you have to, as I imagine like a doctor does, right? Like you have to like remove your own emotion to some extent, but you do run the risk of just looking like a jerk. You know, so it's like, what is the balance of that? I don't know if I have any great advice for anyone on that, but it is, so I can only imagine then, like, I think about how I felt in HR, it sucks. People think it's great to like know what's going on. It's awful to know that you are talking with someone that you like, and that you are about to lay them off and you can't say anything to them.
Yeah.
Like, it is an awful, awful feeling. Okay. Yeah. So, so just like another perspective.
Well, and then like, then when they make HR do it and go through some sort of layoff, and then they get laid off after laying off,
Oh.
you know, it's like, oh gosh. Like,
yeah, they do that. Yeah. Companies can do that too. Yeah. And that's the thing, like so many people like talk about, and don't get me wrong, there are certain CEOs that should absolutely be chastised for the way that they handled layoffs, but like, it's so rare that you can go about it in a way that is very compassionate. You know, I've seen maybe an example here and there, but especially if you are being pressured by like a board of directors or somebody to make the decision like immediately, there's only so much you can do. And I think, you know, as far as like keeping morale up, yeah, I mean, I think it's like getting right on those engagement conversations. And I think the goals piece speaks to feeling like you're part of a larger purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I know that like at a previous organization, we would cascade all of our goals. So everyone felt like whatever they were doing was connected to the bigger goals. Whereas we don't do that at my current organization. I feel like that is kind of a miss. I do feel like if people felt a little bit more tied to it and, you know, and there was greater accountability. And accountability is that double-edged sword, right? Because you implement accountability, but it can also be weaponized, right? It can also be used for blame shifting, you know, so it's like implement the goals, but make sure that they're balanced. Mm-hmm. And the goals are around teamwork and collaboration to achieve the goals. So the how is very much looked at, just like the what. So yeah, so those are kind of some things that kind of came to mind as we were talking through that.
Something you just said brought to mind for me. You know, also, you know, there's no real good way to do that, but when there's a severance package involved, I think it eases the mind of the people left behind. Even like, hey, they did lay all those people off, but they took care of them as well. So
there can be compassionate severance packages, absolutely, exactly. And every company should be providing as generous as they possibly can feasibly do, should be providing that.
Yeah.
There's also a link on here too that you were talking about measuring accountability. There's a link on here about the 7 questions to measure workplace accountability too, which I actually haven't seen until now. So I was kind of looking at that too.
Yeah, I didn't see that before earlier either. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, because it's so important the way you go about accountability to not breed toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're down to our last 5 minutes. And Terry, I know we had that like action reflection slide, but I feel like we've kind of done that as we went along.
So yeah, we've kind of touched on all of these.
Yeah, let me just share the well, actually, Jesse, do you want to share what your biggest takeaway was from today?
Let's see. Well, I will say a few things. One, I'm just like, Culture Amp has like, this is just like skimming the surface, like scratching the tip of some of the research we have. And it's so fun. It's cool to like see things that we have. But also I just like think about like this is such a nice way of looking at the 4 types of organizations. It's a like simple way of looking at it, and it's interesting. I know I said this earlier, but like how so many organizations will be shifting which type of organization they are, and how especially right now with like like the ambiguity of the market and the economy and yada yada yada. So it will be interesting to see how they like knowing you're shifting from and expanding to a holding, and what's a different approach that you need to take. So this is like almost like having the language around like some of this is even helpful, I think, is one of my big takeaways.
Yeah. I would say my biggest takeaway would be I have a lot more compassion for people at the top of the organization to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on, and understanding while they have shifted from one type of organization to the other, how challenging it could be for them to maintain a culture or even recreate a culture after going from one end of the spectrum to the other. Like I said, Twitter is the example that I can think of most presently. I can't imagine what they have gone through and are currently still going through in terms of reshaping the way that their culture is over there.
Yeah, and I think the unrealistic, like to yes and onto that, like how unrealistic some of our expectations are of senior leadership around some of this ambiguity and uncertainty.
Yeah.
And like the transparency that you want to provide is sometimes like not that, like it's either really not helpful or like you can't really give that. It's unrealistic to expect that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like everything needs a balance. But yeah, I mean, I feel like my biggest takeaway is I want to like dive in so much more. Like you said, Jesse, like it very much just scratched the surface. And I feel like it brought forth so many ideas from each of us to kind of look into. But I love that it does give that. I feel like all the insights were things we knew already, but it really kind of crystallizes it in research to be able to speak to it from an informed perspective and share it with our own leaders. And it helped me kind of think about some of the ways in which I'm coaching my leaders and how I can support them a bit more, kind of understanding what are the struggles and what are the kind of direction we should be going. So I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to more of these research guides. So we'll just go to the final slides here. Okay, Terry, take it away.
Yeah, so in closing, our call to action, number one would be reflect on the findings and consider how you can contribute to improving your company culture. Then also be encouraged to have the conversations like Alex just said with your colleagues and managers to identify areas of improvement and brainstorm potential solutions. Participate in ongoing initiatives or programs aimed to promote employee engagement, development, and psychological safety. And then lastly, the goal is to inspire action and drive positive change within the organization. And that concludes our event for today. Let's all exchange LinkedIn information and connect. No, this was
We
great.
already are connected, but yes.
No, I'm looking forward to doing more of these. I think that I was not expecting to then myself be pulled into the conversation. I was thinking more like, oh, we're just going to facilitate the conversation. It's actually good that I take the positive away from, it's just being a small group and, we all feel comfortable having these conversations. I'm sure, Jesse, I remember in San Francisco, we had several conversations on a deeper level. And Alex, we talk weekly. So I kind of know where everyone stands. But I feel like having these types of conversations is what Culture First is all about.
It
Community
is.
building.
And like I mean, like coming to this conversation and having it be so small, we're able to learn a lot more by actively engaging.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of these.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And then